The person that kind of wears two hats as far as wrestling goes is a board member and an athlete advisory committee chair for USA Wrestling. Once we got things started, I wanted to say, our sport really needs unification right now, and I feel like between USA Wrestling and the college coaches, there's starting to become a bigger divide. So I talked with Zeke and Rich Bender earlier and said we need to get together. This is the first time this has happened that I know of in recent years, that really have an opportunity for USA Wrestling to explain some of the things that are going on from them, instead of it's just other coaches saying, well, this is what's going on, this is what I think they're doing. So Zeke comes here and presents to just say this is what's going on, and then give the coaches an opportunity to voice their concerns. Obviously at the NCAA tournament, not the best time because everyone's focused on this, and then you get other places where people get together and talk in small pockets. So the idea is get everyone together in the same room, try to talk about some of the issues, and then that at least gets the ball rolling. And as the year progresses, Zeke's going to be communicating more with the coaches. Hopefully coaches will communicate more with USA Wrestling and really just bridge the gap, because our ultimate goal is to have the best wrestlers in the world at every level. And if there's a divide and no one's really buying into it, then it's not going to happen. So that was the folks that getting over together. It's an open floor. Hopefully nobody has got their egos out, and just be able to throw everything on the floor. Let's talk about it. Let's get it. We only have an hour, but at least this will start the debate and hopefully get some positive ground coming out of it. So that's the purpose of having everyone together. Turn it back over to Zeke.
That's great. Thanks, Kerry. Anybody not get a manual? Pop your hand up if you didn't get one. A couple of you. You guys mind passing those back to the folks that did. So about 4 or 5. If you didn't get one, just yell up and we'll. I don't think it should be really formal. You guys just jump in and we can kind of talk. Kerry, like he had said, had asked to have a discussion about the some areas that we're trying to implement within our national team program. As we know, the challenge is, from my chair is winning World Olympic gold medals, and we're trying to make some adjustments in our overall strategic plan to be able to try to do that. Kerry talked about 3 specific areas to have discussion, and I think it's really, one is informational, to share with you what we're doing, so there's no speculation that, we're doing something or not doing something. We want you to know exactly what we're doing. And then, of course, feedback. The model will only be as good as we can get together and make it good. So the 3 areas that Kerry had mentioned, I don't know if you just said them: regional training center model, discussion of that. We'll try to, and again, these are all discussions that could take all day, but we'll try to keep them short. The resident development freestyle team, we're starting a new resident program to identify the top cadet and junior wrestlers and bring them to the training center. And then 3 is the Olympic redshirting criteria, which we're kind of past that now, but I think it's still good to just hit on it. So I just wrote up some quick notes, and I don't know that I can get it up on the screen, so I'll just say them that. We'll do regional training centers. I think that's probably the most sensitive topic, and I know is something that you guys have all been talking about. Since 2008, we've probably added, I'd say I added up to be about $2.2 million annually to the wrestling industry. And to me, I think that's probably the largest incremental increase in dollars into our sport in a long time. We've got several programs that are regional training centers that are putting significant resources into their elite programming. And really the model is that instead of being a centered base model where we try to get all the best guys to live at the Olympic Training Center, which would be great, but I just don't think is realistic, is we're doing the opposite. We're saying, hey, you don't live here, live in your regional programming, and we try to group them up in areas. And ideally, if we could create them regionally by geographics, we would. But that's not realistic, because you can't drive the money that way. The money is driven through fundraising efforts that you guys do. So what we've done is we're trying to support the regional training model. Just from the programming I grew up in, regional training models were pretty significant at the time. When we had the Sunkist group down at Arizona State, there was one at Oklahoma State, Iowa, and the different places that you already know about. So we're trying to strengthen that model again, because we realize that we can't get dollars and ultimately everyone at the training center. So we're trying to strengthen the regional model. I think we need to really step back and just look at that $2.2 million. I think it's important. That's a lot of money. And if we, my feeling is we can keep it or not keep it. We can keep it or legislate it away, but I think it's a significant resource. And like anything, when money becomes involved, it's making sure we are able to diligently and institutionally control it so that it's fair and equitable, but at the same time is results driven, because as you know, we're a results driven group. The money generally goes to fund senior level wrestlers, to support through monthly stipends, and to support domestic and international training and competition. As you know, guys need money to live, and they need to go train and compete domestically and internationally. So what we did is we've vetted this thing for a long time. I feel like we've had lots and lots and lots and lots of discussion. We've vetted it with NCAA athletic directors, coaches, compliance officers, NCAA rules committees, and with the USOC. We've spent numerous hours working with all those groups. And really the goal is, like we said, is to help America win World Olympic medals and grow our senior level programming in the spirit of the NCAA and fair play. Really what it boiled down to is there were some regional training center legislation that went up, and let me grab the book over here and tell you what number it is. If you go to, because it's really the nuts and bolts of it to have the discussion, if you go to, what's the bullet number for regional training centers? 11. Go to 11, scan back to 11. And just so you know, this manual, I put way more in it than what we're talking about today, but I thought it was important for you guys to know what we're doing, what we're trying to do as a national team, and how you can plug into it. But 11, right, 11? Okay, so the plan on 11 is one, you can look at the NCAA rule that was just put out, 2010-45-1. And again, we worked pretty closely with the NCAA, and like anything, you try to persuade each other, and when you can't persuade someone, you meet through compromise, and that's what we did. We met through compromise to try to create something that, one, was in the spirit of fair play, and then at the same time would achieve our goals with the national team. So that's the legislation. Without reading it, you can look at it, but it's essentially saying this. It's saying, USA Wrestling, you need to have institutional control over your regional training sites, and it needs to meet some certain markers. And the markers that really they said are really on the next document, which is the regional training center criteria. And they basically said that you need to have a floor. There was a discussion, A and B. A was, let's make it so everybody can be involved in it. Every kid can meet the criteria. Everybody can be a part of it. And kind of like a local sports club. B was, they said, you know what, that's not what a regional training site really is. A regional training site should be the best kids. If you're really USA Wrestling and you're really a national team, aren't you really talking about the best kids? So again, through the vetting process, many coaches, people, we argued that point back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But in the end of the day, we were told what to do. And the NCAA essentially said, when they were creating the criteria, they said, you got to have a floor. You got to have some minimum standard that's pretty high. So through that, and you can kind of read the nuts and bolts of the middle of it, they said you got to meet at least one of the competitive accomplishments in the last 4 calendar years. Win a match at the World Olympic Team Trials, Senior Open, University Nationals, placing in these, Junior Nationals, FILA Cadets, FILA Juniors. And then really the one that became the biggest discussion was the high school state tournament. That we originally proposed the top 8 in the state, but through the compliance office, they said that's too low. You could almost have, your room could be full of tons of kids. So we said, well, what about, then we wanted almost like you had to be a state champion to come to the regional training center. And we said, wow, that's pretty high. We'd like to have it a little bit lower. And then we kind of compromised on top 4. And again, I think this is still workable. Remember, this is created by us. And I say us, not USA Wrestling, really everybody in this room. If we want to modify this, we can. We just got to have a consensus on this is what we want to do. So this criteria was very important to them. They felt that, local sports clubs over here, regional training centers over here, because they're essentially the same thing. The only difference is the criteria and the radius. The other factor in this here, that, and again, without go down to number 7, you must live within a 200-mile radius. And that was a big discussion. And again, jump in when you want, because I know there's people in here that liked it and didn't like it. The 200-mile radius was obviously, you have 50 miles for your local sports clubs, but a regional training center with the bar being high, we needed to expand it farther. We're trying to really capture the kids within that region who are good and try to develop them and bring them along. So this was argued over and over and over, and we kind of settled on 200 miles. Again, it can be 500, it can be 100. I don't like closer, I like farther, just because, if you really truly want to capture the top 50 to 100 kids in your area and have them in a regimented daily freestyle training plan, and I'm bouncing around in the freestyle programming, or in the club, it has to be Olympic style, so your practice can't be folk style, it has to be freestyle or Greco. But to capture the really truly the better kids in the area, it has to fit within that regional area. So that's really what we did. And you can read the rest of the criteria. It's pretty simple. Just kind of USA Wrestling requirements, bronze level certified, those different kinds of things.
Question: what if the kid doesn't live 200 miles? Any training?
Yeah, and I think that's something we had talked about that we could add it, or the closest regional training center, because obviously, being out in Arizona State, it's a little harder to go as far. And inevitably, like a local sports club, if you live in Pittsburgh, you got an advantage over Morgantown. Just more kids, population. Again, that's going to happen in the local sports clubs, just like it's going to happen in the regional training centers. And I think there's even you can apply for a waiver with a local sports club if you don't have a densely populated area, that you can go to that club. So a club closest to you. So we can do that same thing here. And again, maybe what I should say here is, once you read this, shoot me or Mitch an email and just say, hey, here's what I think we can vet it now, but if there's things you want to add to this, we're certainly, or delete, we're certainly up for it.
What about keeping the regional sites on
Say it loud, Zach.
What about keeping the regional sites for freestyle going spring and summer, and into college season?
I think you could do that. Again, we could do anything we want just from the chair I sit in. We've got guys that are on the senior national team, the world team, that need to have that practice be freestyle.
Well, at the national team level, obviously we'll have guys, but high school kids coming into the college room during the season, and with certain schools and not having certain funding for freestyle coaches,
Sure.
it interferes with a lot of the college practice, and they kind of unfair advantage to certain small schools that don't have a certain funding. And even OSU, we don't have that. All our freestyle practices and freestyle work that we do with our guys is strictly volunteer.
Sure.
None of it's funded through our school or anything. So us working with our OSU guys or guys that are training at OSU, all of that is done through our club coaches, volunteer work, and through our Cowboy Wrestling Club. Usually their coaches. Now, if say another school has X amount of funding, now you have high school kids coming to train there, freestyle, and see college practice, and it runs into an NCAA kind of feeling of, senior school, almost like it's multiple recruitment in senior school. So keeping it at the spring and summer, now different after graduating college already, but high school kids coming in during the season, it's just another extra unofficial business.
Yeah, and again, I think those are things we can certainly discuss. If you guys all heard what Zach said, what we have tried to do, and it's along the lines of what Zach's saying, is we really, and you can see number 6, for college eligible student athletes, practices must fall under the practice hours under NCAA rules, which you already know that anyways. The NCAA rule, practice hours supersedes our rule, of course, but we wrote it in here to let the NCAA know that we're trying, if there are things that we want to make exceptional for college kids or for recruits, you call them recruits, but really we call them developmental athletes, we want to do that. The balance becomes, the chair you sit in and of course the chair I sit in is, I tell you, Satiev won a gold medal at 19 years old, a world title, and a gold medal at 20. And the reason why was when he was 15, and he was good enough, both physically and emotionally, he trained with the senior athletes. He got pulled up. So for us, that's good. I know for you guys, there's a challenge in recruiting. So that's kind of the rub we've got to to work through. And so I think that's why if we have a radius and we say, what practices, and if you want to limit that, if it makes sense, and I think it's okay. It's during the high school season anyways. It's not like they're focused on freestyle, and they shouldn't be, I would think. They'd be focused on their folk style season till March. That might make sense. I would hate to limit them, but if you feel that, the compromise, one thing outweighs the other, maybe we just say, hey, from November to March, you can't do that, or, certain times. Yeah.
If I could just make mention real quickly, several athletic directors, probably in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 of our bigger Division 1A schools, 1AA schools, have called me over the last couple of months. And what I wanted to do is to share this with the group. And so what we're trying to do is we want to make sure that we work towards a compromise where we can both support our Olympic movement and not do anything that inadvertently jeopardizes the sustainability of our intercollegiate wrestling programs. So I wanted to share these sort of 5 recurring themes that athletic directors, a couple boosters have shared with me, and then maybe there's a couple others out there that your administrations have shared with you. But the goal is to come up with compromises, or at least an awareness. Because what we just want to make sure of is that you guys don't put a lot of time and energy and resources into something, and we get 6 months down the road, and we have to do a complete U-turn. So the idea is try to get everything on the table that we can now. So the first one, and these aren't in any order of concern, but they're recurring themes. One was a liability concern of a high school wrestler competing with a 27-year-old potential Olympian caliber type person. So that was one. The second one would be a funding concern. That obviously all athletic directors across the country are trying to work towards endowing their intercollegiate wrestling programs. And the concern that now the requirement to fund a training center could divert funds from endowing the intercollegiate team away to a training center. The fourth one would have been recruiting. And Zach sort of, maybe that's a compromise in recruiting, but a recruiting disadvantage for the schools that don't have these Olympic training centers or whatever other reasons might result in a disadvantage. And then probably this would be number one on the concerns of compliance officers and athletic directors, just the potential for NCAA infractions. The recurring theme is, how would my compliance officer know if they're doing freestyle or Greco-Roman type stuff? So maybe there's more, and if there's more, let me know so I can add to it, but we just want to make sure we have a good, concise document that we can sort of just vet so we can go down the road knowing that everybody's well informed.
So to address that, and again, egos check the door, these are issues that we're facing right now anyway. So this does not increase anything. There's people out there that are not following the rules, people that are doing things that are shady, people that are splitting their funding, all that. So the issue becomes what's best for the overall development of our athletes as a whole. And that's what you got to look at. So some schools have 9.9 scholarships, some schools have 5. Does that mean you need to cut all schools to 5 scholarships? Some people have great booster programs, some people don't have any. Some people, it's not a level playing field as it exists. And what this is allowing you to do with the guidelines of the regional training centers being as tight as they need to be to not necessarily encourage any more shadiness, but as loose as possible to get the next Henry Cejudo type person to win medals. And you can do both. I think Henry's probably the only Olympic gold medalist that we've had that wasn't a collegiate star, that didn't wrestle in college. So you can do both. It's just making sure that we have the opportunity to expand it.
Let me add on, and then we'll go back to CD. I know he'd had his hand up. My personal, this is my viewpoint. We all have one and perhaps a different one. Is I think the regional training center and the dollars that are going into the regional training center, which inevitably helps your program, I think has increased competition, not decreased it. And here's why I say that. I think prior to regional training centers, there were probably only 4 schools that ever won an NCAA title. But once you started funding regional training centers, that gave Arizona State a chance to win. And I say, and I'm just being frank with you, and I bet, Coach Cole could tell you that, through his vigorous, fundraising and effort, that they've been able, to regional training centers have given them a chance to, to compete for a national championship. So I think it's increased the chances of winning, and of course we know Penn State had a good year, and I think a lot of why they did was the regional training, or part of the reason why is a regional training center. So I think the funding in regional training centers has increased competition, not decreased it. But of course, as you know, it makes the gap wider for sure. Coach?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, we know you're what USA Wrestling's interested, and just pretty clearly states what the NCAA is interested. What they're looking at. There's nobody in here for the NCAA, right?
I don't think so, no.
Well, I think college coaches have.
Oh, yeah, actually, Jeff Jarnicki here is from the Wrestling Liaison, Associate Director of Chandler.
Oh. Never mind. Yeah, college coaches obviously have maybe a little different, along the same lines, but also maybe a little different interest.
Yeah.
I just think that as you make these changes and you adapt and adjust these rules, if you will, to try to please the NCAA and also keep in line with what you're trying to accomplish, that we may try to make sure that there isn't a discriminatory situation that gives one group an advantage over another group. For example, the 200-mile limit. That works great if you're in a region where wrestling's really strong. That might not work so great. College coaches' interest in the regional training center if you're in an area that maybe wrestling isn't that strong. And what I would ask is maybe you consider, keep the limit. Obviously, they're going to want that. The NCAA is going to want that. But maybe if Dan Gable is at North Carolina and a kid from California wants to go and be trained by Dan Gable, then maybe once or twice a year you should have a right to violate that. You know what I mean? Maybe that'll keep everything on a little bit better level playing. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's actually really good. One of the discussions was 200-mile radius. What about all the states that border you? So whatever state your state touches, because that's essentially a region anyways. It's up to you guys. I like farther. From my seat, I like more the better, wider the better. But I get it that the challenge is for you guys. So that number became very tough. So if we want to say 200 miles or any state that borders you, although I know if you're on the East Coast or you're right along the Atlantic Ocean, that doesn't help you. So, Coach? I'm sorry, Rob, I'm having a hard time. Okay. I think it's great. Hey, let me expand on that, Coach, real quick. That right now, if you have practice Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, regional training center, you have to meet this criteria. But if you're going to hold a national team camp, there is no radius. Now, so you can, but it's got to be a national team camp. And part of these, they're getting the website together now. So what you're going to have to do is submit your schedule. And you're going to say, all right, our weekly practice is this time, and this is the coach, and here's who's bronze certified. But we're also going to have a national camp. We're going to designate it this week at this time. And I tell you what we'd like to do is come in and help you do it. I mean, it makes sense. And we're going to identify the best kids in the country and I get the challenge for you if everybody wants to have the 40 best kids in America on their campus for a week. I mean, I understand it. But here's what I recommended. So let's say we take an 8-year period, and this won't help everybody, but it'll help more than less. If we took an 8-year period and said we're going to have 4 development camps a year, and we're going to divide them up so everybody gets one. So 4 times 8 is 32. Not everyone will get one. At least 32 schools will get one in an 8-year period. And then we'll come in and help you run it. You know, we'll do the whole thing. Then at least, and then, you know, that'll help. And we could even pick large schools, small schools, and say 16 large schools, 16 small schools. And maybe we can convince Mitch to throw some money in for the smaller schools, you know, that don't have the big budgets. Because we've got to develop our kids. But I get it, you got the recruiting challenge. But that was an idea I thought of, because I really want it to be fair for you, but I also want to achieve our goal too, you know, getting those kids together and training and teaching them. Because
Are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to, as an RTC, are we allowed to
have a national training camp, sure.
nominate
A clinic?
Are we allowed to say we're sponsoring?
Within our legislation or the NCA's? Within ours? Yeah, sure, I think so. I mean, why couldn't we have a...
No, you can't.
Huh? Yeah. Well, we've had a national team camp at regional training centers already. Yeah. I think what we need to do with that, hey, and I know that's a...
They don't have to pay to be made to pay. You could actually technically pay for them to go out.
What we're going to do to provide institutional control of the... Hey,
No,
just...
you can't do that anymore. You can't pay for it. They have to pay their own way.
Now.
Yeah.
That's written...
You don't have to charge.
But they have to pay their own way. So you can't fly them from California to your place. They have to provide their own transportation.
But you don't actually have to pay charge.
That was a...
So they get their own way out there and then
You pay for their housing, for room and board, and
You can pay for the clinic. You can't pay for room, board, housing, and all that. You
If-
pay for it. So the clinic is free.
Right.
Any cost associated with the clinic, travel, meals, they have to pay for that.
Hey, just so you know, if you do, yeah, right. And let me expand on that. No. Let me expand. One of the big areas, and that's right. Let's make the rule now amongst ourselves.
but that's the problem.
But hold on. Let's make the rule amongst ourselves now. Then it's everybody gets it. Is the big one of the big discussion is who can pay.
Hold on.
I always use a local sports club. Everybody knows what the 50-mile radius, right? 50-mile radius. Okay, if you pay a $50 due and you join the Warriors Wrestling Club, you're a little kid, 10 years old, you pay your $50. They can take you anywhere they want. You pay your entry fee. You're a little 10-year-old. You go represent your Warriors Wrestling Club. They can pay for your hotel. They can pay for your entry fee, your USA Wrestling card. That's a rule already. Little kids do it all the time. Now, I get it. For you guys, it's more than that. It's more than a 10-year-old going to a little kid's tournament. It gives you an advantage. So, really, what we should say is for prospects only. We didn't put it in here because the NCAA didn't make us do it, and it was good for us, but I know the challenge for you. For prospects only, I'm just writing it down. For prospects only, who can pay? We know the kid can pay. USA Wrestling can pay. You don't want to take that away. I mean, because if we want to send, our top high school kid to train, with our top college kid, I know I get it. It's sensitive to you, but we haven't ever paid, just so you know, we've never paid for a prospect to go anywhere. And I know that's been a discussion. Oh, USA Wrestling's paying for all these guys. We never paid for one. But it is that we can pay for, USA Wrestling can pay, the kid can pay. Now it comes down to the last one, which is, can the RTC pay? And if we want to just say no way, I'm okay with that. RTC can't, and it's up to you guys. Raise your hands if an RTC can pay for a kid to come and train at the RTC. Okay, then that's easy. We'll just make that the rule. And I don't think that hurts us. I don't think it's a non-factor.
When you say paid for,
Like fly them in,
what about
room and board.
What if it's say a kid on your team is buddy from high school, he's a junior,
Comes and stays at his house?
Train, stay at his house.
You guys, all right, so in that scenario, raise your hand if it's okay. Raise your hand if it's okay. If you got a buddy that lives in the town, he has got a buddy that lives in the town.
We met with our compliance officer on Monday about this. We have a training camp coming up.
Hold on, please.
August 15th to the 16th, we have a training camp at Ohio State. We met with our compliance. This rule makes no sense whatsoever, but a kid is eligible to train at that RTC camp, he can stay with any RTC number for free, but if he stays with the current athlete of that high school or that college, it's illegal. So someone go and stay with Reese Humphrey or Tom Rollins with developmental athlete for free. Makes no sense whatsoever. But to stay with the current student athlete, it's illegal.
So,
Did everybody get that?
in the interest of time, let's, there's a rules deal on the agenda, right? So, because we could sit here and talk about what ifs and all that, there's still some other things we want to get to talk about today. So, just rules, regulations, guidelines, that's going to have to go through the NCAA anyway. I mean, the bottom line is the concept of the regional training center, the details, all that stuff can be tweaked and all that, but there's a set criteria that said there's rules set up. Those things are in place. We can tweak and fine tune it, but just in general, any other comments on the concepts of regional training centers, what the purpose is, how we're going to go, and if not, we can move on to the other things. So,
what's the timeline for you guys in processing a request and sort of approving a regional training center application?
It's literally just fill out, just so you know, that's good. That's actually a good one. You go on the mat.com, there's a regional, click on national teams. So go to mat.com, click on national teams. Then there's a regional training center link. Click on that, fill out the paperwork, $50, done. That's just to become one. But now, if you're saying you're a regional training center and you haven't done that and paid your fee, you're not in compliance to do that. And the NCAA, if you read their legislation, it says effective immediately. You have to meet the criteria USA Wrestling has set out. So you need to have that criteria sent to us. And we're building a website. It's just got to get done. We're building a website so that you will log in your staff, your roster, everybody has to be a card member. Your schedule has to go on there. If you haven't done, once we get that website, you have to keep that current annually. So that's getting done now. But until then, what we've asked, and I think we sent a mass email out, is that if you send it in writing to Mitch through email, you're compliant until we get the website up. So please send that in to Mitch right away. Coach?
Because we got like to push forward if your kid is in Alabama and he wants to move to Chapel Hill, train for RTC, full reference, push residents should be Chapel Hill. And I think they're looking at right now, whatever. The person moves to the city, as a department, living there, going to school there.
We've gotten that request from another RTC that what defines residents. So, I could see USA Wrestling turning into a compliance office, but inevitably we need to have some institutional control. So we're gonna answer that question. Whether it's you can't be a PO box. That's a workaround, and I don't think. Yeah.
So, will that website be public?
Yes, just so you know, the website will go on the mat.com. It'll have a link. We'll let you know when it's all up and ready to roll, most likely after the World Championships.
Will everyone be listed on there, everyone's roster?
That's right. Everybody should have everything listed publicly. And ideally, I'd like it to be a place where, it can be fun for kids and people to go to. And
Guys, hold on, please, hold on.
One of the concerns with the administration, pulling dollars away from that university, the college program, and putting it into an RTC program. Like to me, the Ivy League, we got to raise all our budget.
Yeah, sure.
And we go start this, and now we're dividing our resources a little bit.
Did everybody hear that?
What is that?
Say it loud to the group.
And I understand. Is one of the concerns with the college administrators starting these programs, pulling resources away from the potential donors, or we raise our whole budget. So if I go and try to do this and do it the correct way that it should be done, now I have to raise more money and limit my. Now I'm splitting. So, what's going to? My point is that since we have to raise X amount of dollars already, other schools that don't have to raise money,
they're going to benefit. Because they have, you know, they can raise $100,000. When I did that, it wasn't a pen.
The only thing I would say is this, though, Rob, interestingly enough, is the calls that I've fielded from athletic directors are from some of our biggest programs. So the concern is if they're concerned about it, you know, certainly I'm sure your athletic director is concerned about it, but that's a big concern.
Has anybody got a counterpoint or response to that?
If you need to fundraise for a volunteer coach, I mean, you get 3 full-time coaches. So if you need to fundraise for a volunteer coach, you're pulling money away from your budget. If you want to go on a trip, you have to fundraise, and that's going to pull. So you're fundraising. Some people are fundraising anyway. Some people have 3 coaches. Some people have 5 coaches. Some people. So it's still. I mean, again, we said before, it's not going to be a level playing field for everybody. So what it comes down to is if you eliminate regional training centers and then everybody doesn't have them,
Still not.
that's one way to go. But if we're all in favor of having these are going to be all the issues that we're going to.
No, I was just saying if that's a concern that these administrators.
Rob, I've heard it just because I've been in 50 of these meetings already, and all these same points come up. Tommy, and I don't know if you can speak for Tommy Rollins, but Tommy has, again, it's Ohio State, but he has felt that it has not been, that it doesn't fragment. People get excited about giving to the Olympic movement, and but again, I don't want to, I shouldn't speak for him. But I could see that being a concern for sure. No, I think it is a concern, sure.
I got something. I mean, you keep saying it's an unlevel playing field anyway, and I agree with you. But also what I see is you're talking about when this gets up and full running, and what Rob's saying is now you're making it even more uneven, and is that helping college wrestling? Because, and you even said it's become more competitive. So we went from 4 schools to 8 schools. Well, what about the bottom 40? Are they in danger? Are they on the verge of extinction because they can't raise that money? We have an established stuff. We've raised a lot of money, but at the same time, we're not going to be able to compete with the big 5, the big 10 when it comes to quality of kids you're bringing in the room and the type of financial resources. We just don't have the numbers. 200 miles in Wyoming.
But that's what we're trying to say. It's financially. A lot of people have opinions, and only a handful of people talk it. Either we do it, and so we're going to deal with it, or we don't do it. So I mean, that's where if we're going to do it, all these issues are going to be here. If we don't do it, all those issues go away. But
I think that's a great idea. But I think we're going to hurt a lot of programs.
How does it hurt them? How specifically does it hurt them? So we can try to fix it.
Yeah, even more. Like Rob.
But they're never going to win anyways. Is a very small, the bottom 40, you just said bottom 40.
Well,
so will the bottom 40 ever win a national championship? They got 3 scholarships. I don't know if that's possible.
Do away with them?
Was around before the RTC. The Hawkeye Wrestling Club has been around before the RTC.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been spending money and changing the playing field for decided sport. And so this is not that big difference in my opinion. And the only thing that's different is you're allowing other people to do that. Well, allowing me as a head coach now to work with someone. That's the only difference. It hasn't actually increased the amount of money that counts.
We got a hand back here, and he's waving real hard.
One thing I want to point out to you guys, the rule change with the October 10th start to the season, that'll leave you guys 3 weeks, those of you in the Pac-10, 4 weeks, at the end of the season, within your 144-day playing season, that you guys could use leading up to the World Team Trials or in non-Olympic years, the Opens. So that'll also help the level playing field, and I'm not sure you thought about that.
No, I think it's good.
All right. So again, we could talk about this all day. Let's move on to.
And just, I guess that's
One little final.
Everybody's gonna throw a hand up though.
Zeke, can we call these kids?
200-mile waiver, and looking at it in terms of how our organization, USA Wrestling, grow, what about exemptions for world team coaches? Like you're going to encourage more college people to be coaches on your staff, USAW staff, and thus giving them a temporary RTC where, look, the world team coaches are going to establish RTC. We're going to need people in there to train because he's the criteria. He is a world team coach. He is one on the world team staff. Or this is just another way for a smaller program that can't raise the money, that can develop an RTC.
Sure.
Hey, work hard, be a coach and staff, help the sport grow, and then you can also have an RTC.
I think the problem is, look, when you truly don't understand the difference between an institutional sports club and an RTC. I don't mean to be insulting, but I didn't either. And I had to go through this, and our compliance officer, they're on me like,
Talking about local sports club, Rob? Yeah, there's really literally no difference.
what they can do versus an RTC.
Only two differences.
Confusion is everybody's like, I mean, you got to know what the differences are. If you don't have one, why would you know? But this the only thing that really is a huge difference is now your institutional staff members. In the past, you couldn't work with some of these kids. So if you really want to make a big, they didn't fix this. You say, okay, our institutional staff members, Kerry McCoy can't work for the RTC during the years. That would be pretty easy to fix, but that's not going to make the problem go away as far as I use fun. Nitty Line Wrestling Club, because they have such a great program. They guys they can still have Nitty Line Wrestling Club, and all their kids can go to that practice instead of regular practice. So this is not changing the playing field as much as we all think it is. But the big difference is with RTC now you can have it with 3 coaches, 4 coaches, and actually do it. So I'm not going to talk down to the possibility of these things.
Well,
You need to know exactly the differences.
now kids can go in your, or I say kids, those national team athletes can go in your room anyways. They can go in your practice room now. So even without the regional training center, the regional training center provides you no extra advantage in the wrestling room. But also, just the last thing over what Tom said, I think was really good, and it was actually what I thought Cole was going to say, is I'd love to see you guys, and again, I get it, we're all competitive and want to beat each other, but working together would be great for us, and I know he's talked about bringing the Division II and III schools around him into the regional training center to develop their staff, to build programs, to ensure they're getting better so they don't get dropped, they actually get stronger. And, I think a perfect example would be like a Penn Drexel, where obviously Midditch is working out with Valeni, and they're 2 miles apart or a half a block apart. And if we're doing those kinds of things, of course for us we get better. And I get it, you guys are competitive and you want to win, but at the same time, if you could, keep that in mind. And last thing, I get last word, appreciate it, is let's, please don't kill this thing. They're kicking our ass over there. It's ugly. And this is one of the ways we can start to compete. And I just hate to see $2 million, not that it all evaporate, but, we've really made some significant progress in helping your guys who get good. So that's it, I guess. Resident Development Freestyle Team, just to let you guys, and it's number, I think it's the number before or after. You can read it. It's you can find it in your book. Hey, if you have any comments on the Regional Training Center, shoot them to me in an email, because we'll keep, this thing is a living, breathing document.
And actually, if there's anything above and beyond those 5 speaking points that I provided, email me, any of your administrators have anything above and beyond that. We just want to make sure we...
Hey, and Mike, too, I was just thinking about your comments when you listed them. Perhaps those athletic directors could call our office and communicate with us directly, because I think we could probably provide them more information than anyone else, because obviously we're in the center of it.
Hey, Zeke.
Yeah.
When is this regional site all decided and finalized?
The regional, well, it's finalized. This is the doc. NCAA legislation's in place. You got NCAA legislation in place, and you have the regional criteria from USA Wrestling.
So it's just finalized 200-mile radius. That's
well, we can change 8, and again, I know we want to move on. As it stands. If you want to change it and make it 400 miles and all the states touching, I love it. That's better for us. And if it's better for you...
Yeah, it's not what we want.
Right. And I think they really didn't have an issue with radius. That wasn't, theirs were, they were okay with that. They didn't have an issue. You make your number. It can be farther than 50 miles like a local sports club. They didn't even, bring a kid from California into Pennsylvania's regional training center. They didn't even say that was an issue. But I knew for some coaches, they didn't like it being that far. A California kid coming into the East Coast to train at a regional training center.
Hey, Zeke, I've been asked to bring something up. Just before you move on out of regional training center, the requirements.
Yeah.
Out of high school.
Pardon me?
He's up at high school.
Yeah.
If we're talking about Sophia when he's 19 or Cejudo, you know, so if I know in Ohio you got our way and your way that's doing a lot of freestyle wrestling way.
Yeah.
We think it'd be beneficial for these RTCs to have a new state champs and junior high state champs to be participating in freestyle with our Olympic hopefuls. And we just wanted to know if there's any feedback from anybody else, or if you guys can sit down and talk about it.
We'll give 1 more minute. That makes sense. Hey, really, yeah. Hey, guys, his thing was, why are we doing this at the cadet level and up? Shouldn't we have a criteria for, you know, a younger age group? And my answer is yes, I think we should. I think we are this isn't enough. We need to expand it to, you know, 10 and 12-year-olds. Essentially, development starts. So here's, as you know, the model is grassroots. Every kid starts to join the sport of wrestling. That's the bottom of the pyramid. As you go up the pyramid, that beginning wrestler who now has some talent becomes a development wrestler. He starts going to state tournaments, regional competition, and then from the developmental pipeline, you become national team. So what we need to do is make the bridge between grassroots, the beginning wrestler, and lead them into development. We haven't done this in this criteria, and that's what we need to do. So we should probably have a junior high criteria. You know, I don't think any of us want to go below 10 years old, 12 years old, but we should probably have about a 12-year-old and up.
I would think though it's not an issue because they're not prospects, so they can do it anyway now.
Yeah, I wonder if the NCAA would say you should probably any junior high kid can come to practice, but a national team guy can't.
Our compliance officer told us
I think we'll have to.
List of requirements, they can't be involved in it. It's got to be listed in this list.
In the criteria.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that hard, but you know, and we maybe we don't talk about the folk style freestyle thing now because it takes more time. But hey, so just flipping gears, guys.
Well, I guess if they're going to be, you guys have a monthly meeting of
I asked Lou and Tom to send it to me yesterday. I talked to both of them.
Okay.
So they're going to send what they think the junior high, or if you think you know what you think the junior high criteria should be, kind of 12 years old and up, we'll put it in. 10 minutes. All right, hey.
Guys, hold on. We only got 10 more minutes. I know Zeke's got a few more things he wants to go through, so
They're kind of crazy.
hang on.
And you can see what I wrote up there after extensive training. We spent about 45 days, you know, through January through March in Cuba, Iran, and Russia, which were the top 3 teams in the World Championships last year. And, you know, just doing a lot of interviewing and talking and understanding, you know, what they're doing. And again, we're not trying to be them, but we want to beat them. And what we're finding is that there are some trends that they move their developmental wrestlers together at a younger age, both regionalizing both locally and nationally. What they're doing is that the Cubans move together at 11 years old. Of course, that's too young. But they start to identify grassroots and put them in the developmental pipeline right away. Russia is about 14 years old. They start to identify those junior high kids who really start to show some talent and start to, you know, group them up, you know, probably most likely locally. And then as that 14, 15, 16-year-old identifies himself as a top kid, they start to move them together again more nationally. So what they're doing is they're putting them with the top wrestlers wrestling each other with the best coaching at a much earlier age. And so really what that boils down to is we're a membership-driven model. That meaning that USA Wrestling has 158,000, you know, we have a couple million high school or wrestlers in the United States with 150,000 freestylers, and really you can go to a tournament as you progress and you keep winning, you keep wrestling, and you keep in the sport of wrestling until you start, I guess, lose and you're out. Well, they don't do that. What they do is they do talent identification models, and actually it's the gymnastics model, what our USA Gymnastics team does, which has actually been the most successful period they've had in 8 years over the last 100. And so what we want to do is we got to be careful. We got to do both, a membership-driven model and a talent identification model, because I think what we're saying is on the membership-driven model, we're already doing that. Our kids keep winning. They go through college, and then we bring them into the national team, and we try to win World Olympic medals with them. In a talent identification model, That's really what the Cubans do, Russia and the Iranians do. They start about 10 to 12 years old. They have 100 little kids come to a local area, and they run them through stations, not tournaments, stations. So they'll identify, their athletic ability, running, sprinting, jumping. Then they'll say, do a single leg, do a double leg, and they'll set up 9 stations. And, they'll have a coach and a referee. They use a referee. A coach and a referee will be at a station, and you'll watch all 100 kids, and then if you're running a station, and you'll look at 100 kids, they'll come through, and your station's, single leg, and you'll evaluate that kid's single leg. Then you'll move to the next station. Then those coaches will take those 100 kids and they'll rank them. And then they'll identify the top 20 kids, and they'll submit the list and say, here are your top 20 kids in that talent identification process. So it's not competition driven, it's talent driven. So they don't start competing till later, where we obviously start at 5. They don't start competing till about 10 or 12 years old. They just don't. What they do is they develop the talent. They put them in they mostly do gymnastic schools from 5 to 10 years old. Put them in, build their gross motor movements, flexibility, plyometrics, and identify where the talent is. And then they say, okay, through gymnastics, you're going to stay in gymnastics, you're going to go to swimming, you're going to go to wrestling, you're going to go to basketball. And then from there, they start specific sports training with them, 10, 12 years old. So what we're talking about doing is developing a similar model. Again, not what they do, but what I think we should do is we look at maybe 4 to 8 places, and maybe we do one in every state. Gymnastics does one in every state. I think for us, we start small. We pick 4 to 8 locations. We do a weekend with them, 2 to 3 days, where we bring, maybe we go into the pockets of wrestling around the country, and let's get the, that local area will say, all right, let's grab the 150 best kids, and they don't even have to be wrestlers. We identify where we think the talent might be. In some process, I don't know how that is, and then what we do is we start to identify that talent. So if we do that at 10 years old or 12 or 14, then at some point we start to identify where the talent is. We start to compete them. We see they have success at a regional level or national level, state level, and then we identify them at 15. And so what we want to do is through that talent identification process, then what we do is we look at the resident development program at the OTC. So we'll pick kids out of the talent identification pool, as well as we want to pick kids out of the competition pool, our membership-driven model, and identify the 15, 20 best kids in America. And our goal is to move them to the Olympic Training Center. I think we've already started doing it. As you know, we've done it before. It's not anything new that a kid that graduates high school comes to the OTC for a year and then he goes on to college. That's what we've been doing. What we ideally want to do is start to identify 6th and 7th and 8th graders, know where the talent is, and then at 9th grade start to bring them to the training center. Start with about 12 kids, keep it small, and I think when we say move them to the OTC, it'll be different for every kid. And I'll tell you, here's what the examples are. It's already happening. Kid Dalton Brady and his father moved up to the OTC. He's gonna do public online school. And because he's the only kid that's moved to Colorado, he will most likely wrestle for a high school. So he'll wrestle from November to December in the folk style season, and then when folk style's over, he'll do 8 months of freestyle with us. The second kind of kid, what I think will happen is once you get 12 of them, though, you're not going to be able to wrestle in the Colorado State Tournament. We know that. You can't bring 15 ringers into Colorado and take over the state tournament. So what we'll probably do is, as you know, is we'll do a public online school or a prep school. And I know Bobby has had conversations with Buxton a little bit about learning the national prep route. And you guys all know the prep route. I think that might be more of what, because it's like a Blair, they can recruit and go to the preps. That would be similar to our model, I think. I think that'll be more workable, where we would bring those kids and go the prep route. And again, I don't know if that'll work or not. You guys are all smiling, so maybe you say that won't work.
St. Mary's is about
maybe what we'll do, though.
So you are going to let them wrestle folk style a little bit.
It'll be two kinds of kids. I think you'll get a kid that's a 2-time state champ, has teched his way through the state tournament 2 years in a row, and we're going to go to that kid and say, you're wasting your time in high school. You've teched your way through the last 2 state tournaments. Let's start focusing on the junior worlds. And we'll start to say, you're so far past. And that's what happened with Henry. He was good enough. He was beating NCAA champions when he was 18 years old. He said, I'm past the NCAAs. I'm going to start focusing on the Olympics. So we'll get a small group of kids who are past their level, I think, who will say, all right, I'm past that level. But I think you'll have some kids, and one kid right now that we have in the program is committed to come. He's going to be online school at his high school. So he'll go back from November to March and wrestle through his high school state tournament. And then when March is over, March through November, he'll be at the OTC. And so he'll train freestyle in those months. So I think we'll have some kids that stay year-round in Colorado, and I think some kids that will go home during the high school year to wrestle in their folk style season. So I think we'll have some kids that do year-round freestyle, and then some that will do both. And here's what I think will happen. And again, there's a lot of devil in the detail, as you guys know. This thing is just in the beginning stages. We're trying to get it up and going. I know we're going to run into pitfalls, and like any expansion of a program, there's challenges to it. But the goal will be to bring these kids, and I think we'll have 3 different tiers. So if we have 15 to 20 kids at the OTC through high school, once they graduate high school, I'm hoping that we'll have 2 to 3 kids that are Olympic medal ready. We should. I mean, Russians are winning gold medals at 19 and 20 years old. We can do it too, if they're training with a senior national team. So we'll get a couple of those kids, and hopefully we can convince them to not go to college, to wrestle, to win a gold medal right away, and we'll put them through school. But I think most of the kids will say, okay, I've come through the OTC program, I'm not Olympic material, but I can win an NCAA championship. I am good enough to do that. I think we'll get a big group of those kids that will be recruitable, and I think you'll get a much better product right out of high school that's ready to win an NCAA title. And I think the bottom tier kids, they're just going to flush out. They're not going to go to college, wrestle, or they'll be out of the program. So that's how I envision what it'll look like. But let me stop there. I know you got a couple questions, and
yeah, we have just maybe time for a question or two. We have our keynote speaker for lunch came in from Europe at midnight last night and he's heading out to Australia right after this, so we really need to get started on time. So I would like to ask if there's another question or two. When we're done, please go right down to the luncheon area and write down where you registered this morning. And get yourself situated.
Go ahead, Coach.
I think a couple of things. I think everybody here supports, think USA Wrestling goes. I think I can see them out of college goes. We just want to play. I mean, the line just continues to move. And we hear this got you through this program doing this program doing that. There's no clarity on the team. Now we're saying, well, 200 is the rule, but if you want to go 400, they'll go 400. Well, when is that? I know that's got to be an NCAA decision, but my experience with the NCAA is they don't move that fast. It's got to go to a committee. It's got to look how long it takes to qualify. I guess that's what I would ask is just give us clarity. And I know you're trying to do that, but that's the biggest frustration that I think that I see is some of the rules. Every compliance process right now, in my opinion, is really different. Depending on if you're a big school and you're out there and you're a huge target, your compliance people are a little bit more on your ass about it. If you're not, you're a small school, not as big a deal, it's like no rules.
Hey, Kevin, let me respond. Let me respond to that.
What we're going through with UFC right now, the danger isn't us shutting down. The danger is without clarity. These compliance officers are going to come in and they're going to start attacking.
Yeah. Now, let me respond to that. That's our goal.
Exactly what I tell them.
That's the goal.
Athletic directors around the country are real concerned. There's so much going on. There's so many potential for security violations. Student athletes interaction in high school. Liability. High school kids getting in there and putting down college guys and possibly level athletes. There's a lot, and that's what you run into danger with being shut down by athletic directors getting together and compliance.
And let me respond to that. Actually, and I think we're in the timeline of what you're talking about. That the regional training centers have been around forever, and it's been the wild, wild west. There's been no institutional control. We've come in and we've created that. We haven't released our criteria, and the reason why is the NCAA rule just got passed in April. So the NCAA said, here's what you can do. So once they said that in April, you think this has been happening for 2 years, but it really hasn't. We've just been trying to provide rules to this program. So the NCAA made the rules in April. We've just created the criteria, and it's been, we're just starting to get it out in May, June, and now where are we at in August? So I think we're moving pretty quickly. Now I think we have rules, and the NCAA is not. They haven't said your rule's 200 miles. The NCAA, if you read this rule, the NCAA has said USA Wrestling, you determine what a regional training center is. We've done that. So we're doing what they asked us to do, and I think we got it. I guess the one thing I would ask you to do is just really learn this program, really understand it, and then if we think we need to make changes to the concept of the criteria, we certainly can. But I think we're on that timeline you're talking about. I hope we are.
Thanks, Zeke. I think if you can hang around, maybe if there's a couple people have questions, and if we could get everyone else in located towns and then luncheon, that'd be great.